because again, this is my focus, my focal point. Right here, don't want to go too much further away from that to keep everything focused on the face. Alright, so let's go ahead and do a quick head sketch. This is a sheet that I'm starting of different head studies for the 2500 challenge. So that's 1,000 heads, 500 arms, 500 legs, 250 hands, and 250 feet. So here's some of my first heads, and I wanted to show you a little bit of how I go about doing one of these quick head studies. Usually I'll start with ball and jaw as my method, but since these are a little bit faster, I do go like a little bit more direct. So I'll start with a head shape, and I'll fit the features inside. This is from the angle of like wanting to make sure I have like a head that fits on the paper. If I start the features first, there's a big chance, you know, I might run out of room to like fit the head on here. Maybe I'll hint a little bit at the hair towards the beginning. I'll point right here, like I don't really mind if I go outside of that shape, especially when it comes to the hair. Although, since I'm doing this, I'll move it a little bit down on the computer. Even though I'm working on the computer, I do try to imitate traditional as much as possible. So that means I try to not touch the undo button. I try not to do free transform, meaning like move the drawing around the screen or anything. And if I want to erase, then I pull out the eraser, again, versus like adjusting it or using like the undo button. So this is my very personal method where I always start with the nose. The idea is this is kind of like my landmark. It's like my center. You know, maybe I'll even include a little bit of like where I want the shadow to go in. But I'll draw it on real fast, like that's my center. And as long as I have that there, for someone like me and the way I work, that's my anchor. So then I can kind of base everything off of that. Not too much detail though, no shading or anything yet, because I want to make sure I get all the features on there. So I really like the kind of smaller size of the eye. I really like this deep part of the lid right here that goes over the eye. That's nice. A little bit of what we call the crow's feet. So those are kind of minor details, especially for like a faster head study. Don't always have to do those, but that's one of my goals of doing all these head studies, is making sure I do have some type of likeness that does look a little bit like the photo. And I'll link in the description to the reference website where I get these photos from. So eyebrow, kind of focusing on the shape of the eyebrow, even though it does have individual texture and hair. These kind of fade off too, which is something to consider. Like they don't have a lot of visible hair. It's kind of like the beginning of the shape, and that's about it. Okay, and then I'll put the mouth in, and then from there I'll kind of evaluate like, hey, is this going okay? Do I need to adjust it? You know, I can erase it a little bit. I can also just draw over it. Drawing over is kind of what I would do if I was doing this in pen. So here's the space from the nose to the chin. Usually it's about a third of the way is where the lips are. Something I tend to tell myself as well as other people is sometimes go just a little bit like lower if the person's slightly older. In general, I try to tell people like, I'll go a little bit higher than you think with the lips, because oftentimes people put it too low. But if someone's a little bit older, you know, you can put it just slightly lower than you think, just to kind of help with that experience. That's my friendly word for age, someone's experience. It's one of the reasons I like this website. There's a lot of different people, all kinds of ages and backgrounds. This is also one of my favorite ways to sketch heads. These are what I call candid photos, right? That's what they are. They're very candid. Like they're taken sometimes like off the cuff, not totally with the person's attention focused on the camera or anything. And this reminds me of when I'm drawing in the city or drawing in like a coffee shop. So it's kind of like the real life or a simulation of like real life when you're drawing people out and about. Okay, so at this point, again, my features I feel not too bad about. Face shape's not too bad, also on the side, you know, even like where the chin is and everything, and the cheek, I feel pretty good about that. These are also fast, so when it comes to likeness, you know, if I get away with like 80% likeness, you know, to the photo or to the person, I feel pretty decent. I'm not trying to match, as I would say, like molecules. Like, I'm not concerned with this looking exactly like this person, because when I'm studying heads, I'm just trying to draw really good heads, good volume, you know, good features, considerate of like dimension and structure. And likeness comes kind of naturally or like later in the process. And of course, the longer the drawing, the more time you can spend on that. Even now, you know, I'm grateful to talk out loud and kind of think out loud for what I'm doing, but I should go a little bit quicker. Normally I'd be a little bit quicker for sure, if I'm not talking out loud as much. So this is also a distance that's a lot longer than you think from the nose to the ear. So in some cases I'd rather go too long than too short, because a lot of times what happens is the ear will kind of end up right here, and you sort of lose track of that side of the face, which there's quite a bit, like surface area wise, quite a bit of space between the nose to that ear. I love this little shadow right here that often pops up right there underneath the ear. It's one of my favorite just little pieces of depth. Okay, and so at this point, maybe before I get too much into the hair, I'll put a little bit more work into the eyes. Those are my focal point, or I'd like them to be my focal point. So I'd love to put as much attention there as possible, or the most attention. So I'm going to have her look a little bit more to the side, maybe, than the photo. Again, go for 80% likeness, 80% accuracy, 80% likeness. Focus on drawing a really good head, right, when you do studies, versus making it match the photo. Because we don't want to do an observational drawing. We don't want it to just be about a photo. We want to learn from this. We want to be thinking the whole time, and the only way to do that is if we're analyzing. So even on the head studies, I do like a little bit of the shoulder, or like the neck, just for some context. I love all this body type over here, all that nice kind of interaction of skin, you know, these cool little like shadows. It's great. Again, something I love about this website and this kind of reference. Very, very candid, realistic people. Okay, so she has this cool headband. The focal point, the area of focus, again, is the face, and especially the eyes. So stuff up here, you know, whether this is a study or even something a little bit longer, like a, you know, 20 or 30 minute drawing even, I want to keep the attention kind of low up here. You know, get some information, try to even communicate what's happening, in this case like the headband, but not get too descriptive. So that's one of the few lines I'll erase. I think I used the undo button on accident on another part here. And again, that's okay when you're doing digital. In fact, I want to make this whole neck and shoulder area a little bit higher. So yeah, it's definitely okay to undo. That's a personal thing for me, where I'd like to imagine like, oh, traditionally I wouldn't be able to do the undo button. And even erasing is very important. For a quick study, we don't want to erase too much, because in that term, quick, right, we're just trying to be a little bit more direct, you know, not him and haw as much. And then I try not to use the eraser for that reason, and then also to imagine if I was doing this in ink, which I do love to draw with like ballpoint pen or like micron, and so of course in that case I wouldn't have as much opportunity to erase. Okay, so also the way this looks on the screen, I believe on the video, is exactly like how far it is for me. So I'm not really zoomed in at all. Like the way you see it on the screen is how far it is. So even when I'm doing this smaller, like a little bit of shading. It's still pretty far away from me zoomed out wise, which definitely is the way I want it to. I don't want to get zoomed in. I don't want to tunnel into this at all. So right now I'm kind of focusing on that makeup. The dark kind of outline in her eyes is really nice. And then very lightly, actually I'll point this out in red, I'm trying to also like match up this as best as I can. One of the wonderful things about being a person, being human, is it's not always symmetrical. You know, we do have like a lot of asymmetry, whether it's in the shapes, even like in the angle of our eyes. But that said, it's definitely a little bit more comfortable feeling drawing-wise if we try to match that stuff up or make it behave together. So in that case, I would tell myself, yeah, let me try to like make sure these eyes are about the same height, similar top, similar bottom. Putting a little bit of shading, again, into the eye, the focal point. And my method of shading for a lot of my drawings, even the longer time ones, longer duration ones, would be just this simple kind of up and down hatching. Maybe like a little bit of tilt here and there, but otherwise just a single direction. And the idea behind that would be if I use just one simple direction, so like this over here on the side, just kind of like up and down, it keeps the information simple, so like not too complex. And then since I'm not really using shading that goes with the shape of the face, like along the contour, as we'd call it, then don't let me not go, you know, in kind of like weird directions like this, or like up and down or diagonal. It's like, let me just keep it like one uniform direction. It's very graphic type of shading, you know, meaning it's not totally dimensional, but it does represent form. It does help with some of the dimension. Okay, so I'm trying to put this a little bit in my focal point, so mainly in the face, the facial features. Earlier I did a little bit on the mouth, right, on the lips. Again, this is a little bit longer than I normally would go. I enjoy talking about it and kind of giving some insight, but usually I try to get this done in about, 5 minutes would be great. Less than 10 minutes would be, the best. Anything over that, I want to get going. I want to get on to the next one. So, do you really like the modeling in the jaw here? So, put a little bit there. And one of the bigger points would be to just try to avoid a lot of shading over here, like on the right or on the top. This is getting farther away from the focal point, these pieces up here and on the side. So then let me not go too much into those. So some of the last stuff I'll do is a little bit of shading for the depth of the hair to show like just these nice little pockets of shadow with the hair overlapping the head. Maybe a little bit of this too, where this hair is going over. But again, not too much more than that. Want to show maybe a little bit of the hair texture building up there. Maybe in a little bit of this cheekbone. So even though we have a nice body type that's like a little bit smoother in the anatomy, like we don't see a lot of key anatomy points like we would on kind of like a really, bony sort of surface or face. We still see things like that. We see like a little bit of like cheekbone shadow, right? So that's a nice thing to put in there. And then speaking of kind of the candid, really everyday quality, really wonderful quality, I like these little pieces on the skin, like little couple of blemishes, maybe like a little bit of a freckle. That's really nice to just give that skin texture, especially because we're not doing a lot of shading. Okay, and then very last thing would be, I'm using the eraser to like gently soften that cheek right there on the left. Again, don't want to do too much of that. And I'm kind of cleaning that shape up. So the outside shape of the face, giving that like a little bit more strength in the line, and then that way things on the inside feel a bit more delicate. And there's shadows over here, right? Shadows like in the hair. There's a shadow up here. There's like texture in this headband, yet I don't want to push that too far. Because again, this is my focus, my focal point. Right here, don't want to go too much further away from that to keep everything focused on the face. Keep it simple, right? Not go too far into it. And so I think one of the last things I'll do is I will give a little bit of depth here on the shirt and the skin. A lot of background noises. I think I heard some beeping from the laundry machine, some sirens outside, so hopefully not too distracting, but these are the realities of film, right? You never know. Unpredictable. Okay, so I think I'm going to call it, and I'll do a little bit of a zoom in at the end of this video so you can see this kind of isolated on the screen. But yeah, again, not too bad on the time, a little bit over time, past 10 minutes. Normally I try to do between 5 and 10 minutes, but this is how I go about doing a very quick head study. I'll link the website down below for reference that I'm using, and otherwise, thanks for watching.